Ed Miliband is trying to woo a sceptical business community. The Labour leader insists only he can avert the clear and present danger posed to the economy by a Conservative referendum on Europe. But can Mr Miliband diffuse business hostility towards his own party? Joining me now to talk about this is John Gapper, business columnist, and Jim Pickard, chief political correspondent. Jim, you were at the event today in the city where Ed Miliband launched his business manifesto. What sort of reception did he get?
It was at Bloomberg's headquarters in the city. The audience was made up of Labour people. There was someone asking a question from the young Fabians. There were some business people there, but it was a broadly polite audience. It was a positive response. But then again, people who hate Labour wouldn't be there. Also, many business people wouldn't be there because on 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, they have other things to be doing with their time. So it was reasonably positive, but you couldn't necessarily gauge thus business likes Ed Miliband.
But we know already, don't we, from the reporting we've done, that business leaders are not happy with some of Labour's policies. What is it they don't like?
Well, if you think about Labour Party's manifesto policies as a menu, this is a menu with an awful lot of things that business absolutely hates. There are new levies, for example, on the tobacco industry. There are new higher taxes on people with wealth, people with large homes, people who have salaries of over £150,000. So at a personal level, a lot of business people don't like it. There are also interventions. If you think about what Labour wants to do with the energy industry, that is quite sort of 1970s style in the way that they want to go in there, create a whole new pool of energy companies, give new teeth to the regulator. And every industry you look at, I mean, banking in particular, they come down quite hard on banking. So you've got this whole menu of things that aren't very palatable for business leaders. And yet there's one thing on the menu, which is this offer that we, Labour, will not have a referendum on membership of the European Union, and therefore you don't have to worry about that. And that, they hope, is their one big sell.
Well, that's right. And John, I wanted to bring you in here. I mean, Labour are pinning everything on this idea that because they want to commit to Europe, they don't want a referendum, that this for business will outweigh any of the other disadvantages. Do you think that argument will play with business leaders?
I think that position, that clear position on EU membership will certainly appeal to bigger businesses, the leaders of FTSE companies in particular. But as Jim says, they've got actually quite a lot to outweigh. And I think there's actually a distinction here also between some of the policies which some businesses might well like, an investment bank, more investment in infrastructure, some new mechanisms to finance small businesses, with some of the rhetoric. And I think it's the rhetoric, particularly, for example, Mr Miliband's talk of predators versus producers in 2011, that has still got a lot of business leaders rattled.
Whatever happened to New Labour?
Well, Mr Miliband says he wants to turn his back on it. I think there's actually a bit of a tension, certainly on some of the business-related policies, between Mr Miliband and Stuart Wood, Lord Wood. He's one of his closest advisors and a member of the shadow cabinet. And the somewhat more pragmatic wing, led by Ed Balls, Chancellor, and Chakra Muna, the shadow business secretary, they're emphasising more continuity and trying to reassure businesses a bit more.
I mean, Jim, New Labour won 3 elections in a row. They were the most successful election-winning machine since the war. Why would anyone want to break with that?
The thing that people tend not to ask is whether it was because New Labour was successful that many business leaders flocked to them, or whether it was the other way around. And actually, I think there is a sense that business does like to be close to a political party that's about to win an election, for very obvious reasons. And this time round, not only is Labour sounding quite hostile to them, but they don't particularly look like winners. I mean, we clearly don't know who's going to win in May, but it doesn't particularly feel like Labour, and therefore you wouldn't flock to them for the reasons that we want to be close to the people in power. And I think also just Ed Miliband genuinely believes that there's a new way of doing politics and that you can break away from these old rules of the past, such as we have to be really close to the media, we have to have at least some big business on board.
John, if we're being fair about this, we'd have to say business isn't entirely happy with the Conservatives either.
No, I think there's a doubt about the Conservatives, particularly obviously on the EU referendum. But I think it's Jim makes a fair point that even the things that business most fears about Labour turning left, it's not anything of the mould of the Bennite left of the 80s, the alternative economic strategy. It's something rather more subtle and almost continental European than that. And all of this policy really comes out of a sort of a post-Bennite phase in the Labour Party. So I don't think we'd see this, anybody would really seriously see this as socialist with a capital S. There's just enough there to concern a lot of businesses that it's turning back on what it liked about New Labour.
I think to pick up on that as well, I mean, what Ed Miliband and Labour would say is that a lot of these policies are designed to help consumers. They're not kicking business for the sake of it. You know, the end result is theoretically lower energy bills, a better service from the banking industry, and so on. They're not doing it for the sake of it.
Well, I suppose now, first day of the campaign, over the next 5.5 weeks, we're going to see what the voters make of it all. John, Jim, thank you very much. And you can follow all of the FT's election coverage live on ft.com.